Business in the Community, Ireland.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. We'll just give it a minute for everybody to come in. Okay, we will start. Before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. The session today is being recorded. As always, we welcome input from our attendees, so please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens to submit any questions for our speakers or any comments that you might have. For any queries afterwards, of course, please reach out to the Elevate team at elevate@bitc.ie. Uh, what are we going to cover today? So in today's session, we will talk about importance of data in the Elevate Pledge. Uh, we'll talk about a little bit of what our data looks like. We will have Andrea Driver from Servier talking about their approach to voluntary disclosure. Followed by that, we will have my colleague Louise Murray in conversation with Norma Conway from PTSB talking about how they are navigating data capture in the current environment. We will, of course, have time towards the end for Q&A with the speakers. And in the end, I will give you a quick little update on what the timelines look like for the 2026 Elevate data collection. So within the Elevate Pledge, at the heart of the Elevate Pledge is a commitment to presenting a comprehensive diversity profile of the collective workforce that is represented by our signatory companies. So when a CEO signs the Elevate Pledge, they commit to recording the diversity profile of their staff. Now, that commitment is not just made to submit the data to the pledge, but that commitment is made to unlock the stories behind those numbers. What does our workforce look like? Who are we representing? Who are we not representing? What can we do to ensure that we reflect society? What can we do to ensure that everyone gets the same access to opportunities? What can we learn from these numbers? What does the future look like? Recording diversity profile is a starting point to answer these questions, maybe many more. When we started reporting in 2022, there was shyness, maybe a little bit of fear amongst businesses to capture diversity data. Naturally, given it has protected characteristics, and there was very little conversation around it. But over the last 4 years, we have gathered momentum. Businesses are becoming more transparent. Businesses are gathering more holistic data. No one's gathering data in isolation anymore. When we reviewed the 2025 Elevate data against the first year's data, we realized that while some indicators have shown consistent disclosure, other indicators have shown exponential growth in disclosure. For example, if you look at gender, gender has a consistent disclosure in the higher 90s throughout. Although indicators like ethnicity have their disclosure in 2025 is 3 times of what it was in 2022. Disability disclosure is now 8 times of what our signatories gave us in 2022. And sexual orientation is 4 times of what it was when we gathered the data the first time in 2022. So you can see there is increased confidence in data, but there is still a very, very long way to go. While the growth is exponential, we definitely need to review what are our targets? Where do we want to go? What does our demographic, our workforce look like? Data collection and reporting has many benefits. I was actually reading a research recently, and very interestingly, it mentioned since the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, the research said that consumers and um, business users are reporting being 4 times more likely to buy from companies and engage with businesses that speak out against racism. So when you talk about your diversity data, even if it is not what you want it to be, even if it is not reflective of your society, there is a positive impact on on people's attitudes towards your company. The positive brand impact, um, having a commitment towards your workforce when you openly address those issues, when you talk about that openly, it has a positive impact. There is also a robust connection between strong enabling cultures and positive business outcomes. So there's always a similar impact internally as well on your staff. So when your staff sees that you're putting emphasis on diversity data collection, how deeper insights from that data are being used to take tangible actions, of course, that will impact your culture, their engagement. So today in the session, we will be hearing from 2 practitioners from our very own Elevate community of practice. So, firstly, I would like to invite Andrea Driver to join me on screen. Andrea is the CSR specialist at Servier Ireland Industries Limited, and she'll be sharing with us a snippet of their voluntary disclosure journey at Servier. Andrea we've had many conversations regarding this. Andrea, you're very welcome this morning, and I will now hand over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Risha, and good morning to everybody. I'm delighted to be here this morning to present on behalf of Servier our experience and our feedback and learnings from voluntary disclosure, which came about from our first survey, which we held in November last year. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Servier background first. If we can have the first slide, Risha. Thank you very much. So I work for Servier. We're a pharma and manufacturing and packaging company in Arklow, which is in County Wicklow. We are here 36 years, so we were established in 1989 with just 3 staff when we started. So you'll see over on the right-hand side, we've 591 staff now. So we've grown quite a bit. We started out on a 60-acre site. We bought a greenfield site and built our production facility from that. We are part of the Servier group, so it's a French group, and we are governed by a non-profit foundation. The Arklow site is the biggest production site in the group outside of France and the second biggest in the group altogether. So we make 40 products here in Arklow, and we export to 95 countries around the world. All our products are in tablet form, so we don't make medicines or capsules, and everything is packaged into bottles or into blister packs. We focus on 3 therapeutic areas. That's cardiovascular, neurology, and oncology. So that's just a little bit about Servier. So on the right-hand side now, we'll have a look at our demographics and the people that make up the team here in Servier. So our headcount now is 591, and you can see we are split up into 10 departments, which are listed there around the edge. And in the first bubble down the bottom, you'll see that about 2/3 of our staff are made up of people working in operations or in operational roles. 61% male, 39% female. We have, of our staff, 81% are Servier employees and 19% are agency staff. And we have about 18 plus nationalities here on site. So that just gives you a brief overview of Servier and of our people. So I can move to the next slide now, please, Risha. So first of all, we may as well look at the results first, which will explain, I suppose, why I'm here today to talk about it. So we held our first survey last November, and we had a headcount of 567 at that time. Now that 567 includes people who are on maternity leave, long-term sick leave, maybe we're sick on the day, business travel and so on. So I'd say the number was probably 545, something like that. But we had 403 people complete the form and return it to us, which gave us a 71% participation rate. We didn't know what to expect. It was our first survey, but we were really, really delighted with 71%. So how did we get there? So I've put down the path. So I suppose it's all started obviously with the Elevate Pledge. We had met with business in the community. We've been members with them for a long time, but we had met with Linda and Ronan and Risha and discussed the Elevate Pledge. And they gently persuaded myself and NASA. So NASA is the picture above me there. NASA is our head of EHS and CSR. And they just showed us the benefits and why it is a good thing to do a diversity survey, as we call it here. So we were convinced. We went to our workplace committee, which is one of our 5 CSR committees, and they also thought it was a great idea. And then we went to the senior leadership team. Now, obviously, you need buy-in from your senior leadership team or your board. Whoever is going to agree, make the decision that, yes, we should go ahead with this. And I would say to you that if that's the point you're at, and if you're looking for buy-in from the board or from the leadership team, and there are people that need convincing, contact business in the community, talk to Linda O'Sullivan. She is brilliant at doing presentations, can explain it much better than myself or NASA could have, can answer questions and really alleviate any of those concerns and really show the benefits that there are to doing a diversity survey. So once we had the leadership team on board, we then went to looking at the questions. How are we going to do this? When are we going to do it? And what do we need? And we needed to make some decisions. The when for us was quite simple. When are we going to do it? So as I said, we're a production facility. We work 3 cycles, a 3-shift cycle, and we're 24/7. A lot of our people, 2/3 of them, are in operational roles. They're not on laptops every day. Only 1/3 of us are on laptops every day. So sending it out by email was not going to work for us. We would have got a much lower response, and the response would have been from the people in admin. So not only would we have got a lower response, we would have got a skewed response. We wanted to reach everybody in all departments and across all areas of Servier. So we decided that we would do it in November, which is when we hold our end of financial year event. So every year we hold our end of financial year event in person. Because there's 600 of us on site, we can't do it all in the one space. So we hold, I think it's 7 or 8 sessions over a 24-hour period. And we discuss our results from last year, our goals from this year, and some other topics. And last year, this was one of those other topics. So we had decided when we were going to do it, and it was November. How we were going to do it? We were going to do it in paper form. We were going to leave paper for when everybody comes in and sits down, they would all have a form and a pen each to fill it in and or take it away. We'll come to that later. And what do we need? Obviously, we needed paper, we needed pens, but we needed the buy-in from people who were going to fill this in. We already had the buy-in from the leadership team, the workplace, myself and NASA, but now we needed everybody on site to buy into this and agree to do this. And then came the fear. So we had agreed to do this. We had planned to do it. We're going to do it in November. And then it's like, God, do we really know what we're doing? What if everybody stands up and says, we're not filling this in? What if people ask us questions on the day that we can't answer? And then we said, no, we're doing this. So we went on to the preparation for the November event and the communications. The preparation, really, it was just the logistics of it. The communications is absolutely central to our result, and we'll look at that on the next slide. And then came the fear again. So at every stage throughout this process, I would say there was fear. There was fear in the preparation, there was fear on the day, there was fear waiting for the results to come in. It's absolutely natural. We had never done anything like this before. In 2023, we did fill in the survey, but we took the information from our own in-house HR system. So it was very limited, and it didn't include our agency staff, as the agency hold their details. So there was a lot of fear around doing this for the first time. So we can move to the next slide, please, Risha. So at the top there, you can see communication, communication, and more communication. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's absolutely imperative that you do this if you want to try and and get a successful result. Our communication, forms of communication, are emails. You can see them listed there, Teams, screens. So we have screens all around the site. The information is updated daily or every couple of days, depending on what news comes in. Flyers and posters. I know they're not the most environmentally friendly forms of communication, but sometimes, particularly when people, if you're in an office where everyone's in front of a laptop, that's fine. But when you're in a facility like this, you nearly need to stick posters right on the door in front of where people are coming in and out. We have monthly meetings here in the different departments. So we made sure that in each monthly meeting in the 12 weeks leading up to the survey, we had this as a topic. And it was the same message being carried out across the departments. We have our ComCom. So about 5 years ago, we set up a communications committee, which we call the ComCom for short. I'm a member of that committee, and so we worked to make sure that all our communications were consistent and regular and that everybody was getting the same message. And then our workplace committee were obviously involved and promoting it and talking to people about it when they could. So the 12-week campaign started with an introduction. We went out again by all those medium above, by email and Teams and so on. And we explained that in 12 weeks' time, we're going to have an anonymous survey. We listed the other companies which business in the community supplied. We listed all the other 60 companies, I think at the time, or 61 companies, so that they knew it wasn't just a Servier initiative. And then we reintroduced, I suppose, or reminded everybody what the Elevate Pledge is, what it's about, and why we are doing this. And then the survey. Why we're completing the survey? Well, as Risha said earlier on, it's about looking at our profile and the stories behind and seeing where there's gaps and so on. What the survey is. It's a survey of 14 questions, I think we had on ours. When it's going to be in November, and how it's going to be a paper survey. And then in the remaining weeks up to the actual day of the survey, we released one or two questions per week. Or actually on this slide, we had 4 questions. So the slide on the right will show you one of our communications. It's probably a bit of a busy looking slide, but at the very beginning, the slide would have had just the categories and none of the drop-down boxes were completed. And each week we went out and we put in green the one or two that we were focusing on, and we put the options below the drop-down boxes, if you know what I mean, so that people could see the options that they were going to have to tick on the day. We also paired our questions. So, for instance, rather than sending out 1 week focusing on, say, sexual orientation and gender, that people might not be so comfortable, some people may not be so comfortable filling in, we paired them. So say sexual orientation with I don't know, something that's much, say, terms of employment or something like that, something that people are very comfortable to tick, and another one that some people may have found not so comfortable. We paired them together. And then we reminded at every communication that this is anonymous and voluntary. Nobody's going to know who you are, and you don't have to do this. But our communications were consistent every week with 2 more questions, or 3, 4 on this occasion. It came up on our screens, it was in posters and so on all around the site, so you really couldn't miss it. So we can move to the next slide, please, Risha. And then on the day, so November came along, and I have to say myself and the workplace committee were quite nervous about this. Again, the fear was back. So on the day, I think we had 8 sessions for an hour long. So once everybody came in, 80 people or whatever it was, came in and sat down in the room, a member of the senior leadership team would stand up and introduce the session and say, okay, today we're going to discuss our results from last year. We're going to discuss our goals and ambitions for the next year. And we're also going to have some other topics such as this, and also, as you all know, this year we're going to fill in our first diversity survey. And he or she would say, there are forms on your table. I would ask you not to turn them over yet. It's going to be addressed later on in the session. And then later on in the session, when it came to the time, myself or one of the workplace committee would stand up and say, okay, now we're at the time for filling in the diversity survey. You've all seen the communications. You've all seen the questions. There's no surprises here. If you have any questions, please ask, but we would ask everybody to fill in the form as best they can. At that stage, we also gave a reminder of why And the example that we gave on that day was the question about disability. So we said, look, there's a question on the form about disability, and it asks if you have a physical disability or a psychological or chronic illness. You might tick no, or perhaps you might tick prefer not to say. And so we explained, if we receive a lot of forms back and a great number of people have ticked prefer not to say, then we have to ask ourselves why these employees would prefer not to say. Now, of course, it's everybody's prerogative to say or not to say, but we want to make sure that we are a company who is welcoming and we're here and welcoming so that people with disabilities can come forward and say it to us, to HR, or just to their colleagues. So that was an example we gave, that if we find a high number of people have ticked prefer not to say, then we need to look inwards at ourselves to see if it's an area we need to improve on. Another really good point, I think, which was a great seller, was that we said that there was 160,000 other employees around Ireland, which were also filling in the same survey. I think that really was good, because it meant that the 80 people in the room at each time didn't just feel it was them. This was something that was happening across Ireland. We asked them to complete the form today, where you're sitting, and drop it into one of the containers around the room when you're leaving, or in the next 2 weeks. Take the form away with you, or it's also been sent out an email, and fill it in your own time and drop it again into one of the containers located around the site. And again, just to reiterate, it is anonymous and voluntary, but we would appreciate if you are comfortable in filling it in, if you could do so. And that's really, you'll see the form on the right-hand side that we used. We did add one question. So we took away a couple of questions. The questions we took away were ones we didn't need to have on. And they were paid, I think it's how often people are paid, which we're paid every 2 weeks. Everybody is. There was no need for us to put it on the form. And the other one was location, Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland, I think, and we're all Republic of Ireland. So we took away the two questions that we didn't need to have on the form, and we added one down the bottom about neurodivergent, if you consider yourself or have you been diagnosed as neurodivergent. So I think there were 14 questions, and we kept it to one side of the sheet of paper, just trying to make everything as simple as possible. So in closing, I would say that if everybody's looking to do this or hoping to do this, first of all, I'm missing it there, but you need buy-in, obviously, from your senior leadership team or your board, the people who are going to be rolling it out, and also from the people who are going to be filling it in. If you don't have that, you're not going to have a great result. And then you need a clear introduction. What is this about? Why are we doing it? And then communication, explaining everything before the actual survey comes along. And then, just as I've said, to keep it as simple as possible. And that is things like, having just the questions. I would say if there's a couple of questions that you don't need, if you're doing it in a paper form, try and keep it on one side. For people who everybody's on email, that is definitely much simpler. And I envy you in a way, but I hope that if there's anybody here today that has a similar setup to us, with a number of people that aren't on email every day, that you might have found something useful from the presentation. And that is me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. That was brilliant. I think we'll take a quick break and see if there are any questions. But that's huge. That's a quick whistle-stop tour that you gave us of what you've done, and we can totally see that there is a lot of planning that has gone behind it. So what you've covered in 15 minutes possibly took much, much longer than that. I have a couple of questions here. One, of course, there's a question to say, did you, considering your comms were so engaging, did you get many people come back and ask you additional questions on any of the topics?
We didn't have too many. We might have had a couple. Just one of the questions that we have found. So I would say one of the questions that we found wasn't straightforward was the one about would you describe yourself as coming from a lower socioeconomic background? That was something we did have a few questions before it, really about what does that mean. We tried to explain it better in hindsight, and it's something we're going to improve this year, and we have spoken to you about it. We didn't have very many questions. Admittedly, I did have one or two people who said they wouldn't be filling it in. You know, that's absolutely fine. And I said, absolutely, that's your prerogative. So there were people that I would, that messaged me that I would, I was a little bit surprised, but they messaged me and said, just to let you know, I won't be filling it in. And I said, that's absolutely fine. You're never going to get 100%, never. And this is the whole thing. Some people aren't comfortable. And maybe that person who wouldn't fill it in last year, maybe they will fill it in this year or next year. I think the other thing to say is we're taking actions this year on the results from last year, and we'll tie them back in. So at the moment, like one of our results we found not necessarily high, I think it came in about average, but was that a number of people consider themselves or have been diagnosed as neurodivergent. So at the moment, we are carrying out a 4-week neurodiversity campaign, and we are releasing a neurodiversity policy and also an inclusion statement. And we are tying that back to the results of the survey last year. So this year, when we're doing our introduction, we will be able to say, and from last year's survey, this is what has come about. So I think that's important too.
That's brilliant. No, and you're right that it's always important to tie it back. The couple more questions, Andrea. One is how long did it take end to end for this piece to work, and how many people were involved?
So I suppose the decision was a few months before the November deadline or when the event was taking place, and it was 12 weeks of communication. That's what we did. So we used the first maybe 3 weeks of I mean, I can certainly share this as a summary afterwards. I was looking at it yesterday. You know, the first week, I think we shared the fact that we're doing a survey. It's going to happen in November. And it's part of the Elevate Pledge. The next week, maybe it was, do you know what the Elevate Pledge is? And a reminder of what it is and what have Servier signed up to and so on. And then the next week, a bit more, and then the questions. And every week we would say, this is, remember we told you last week about this, and this is a question from that. So we kind of tied it all together and kept it consistent, but 12 weeks of communication.
Sounds good. And how many people?
How many people? So we had, I think there was 6 of us on the workplace committee, and then the communications committee. I suppose I'm the strong link. I mean, this is my role, so probably a lot of it was me. But certainly I couldn't have done it on my own. But a lot of it was me and our communications specialist helping me with the communications. Yeah, we already have a good communications thing in place, so it was easier for us. I would say, you need to make sure your communications are, and as I said, we have to put posters up. We've got to walk past people and say, have you read the poster? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? And you'll still meet people who say on the day who say, oh, I never heard about this. But I think it is a topic that probably people would have talked about more than something else, because some people might have been saying, oh, have you seen this survey? What do you think? Are you going to fill it in? So it's probably something that people would talk about more than other topics that we're trying to communicate on.
And it started a dialogue, which is a win.
Exactly.
Sorry, I'll quickly try and go through a couple of others, and we can come back to them later as well. There's a question on some colleague is asking if they can ask how you input the data with so many paper forms. They have 2,300 people, and it would be a lot to manually input.
Yes, there is no easy answer to this. I did it last Christmas when the office was quieter. There is no, we had sort of said we would do it. We would take chunks each, I think there were 3 of us. But yeah, it was input manually. We did try to think of an easier way. It just wasn't going to work for us. If anybody comes up with an easier way, let us know. We had thought of laptops. We had thought of everything. We were never going to get a result like this without doing it in a paper form. So yes, it's not environmentally great, and it is laborious, but it was the only way, until something else comes up, it was the only way we were going to be able to do it.
Um, yeah, it is. It is not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
not easy. And I remember when we had this conversation the first time about doing a paper survey, and I think I myself had like 3,000 questions for you as to, oh my God, Andrea, how are we going to do it? And then we had that conversation for a very long time. And in the end, we agreed that that's the way to go to
Yeah.
capture
And
everybody.
one thing I would say is with your spreadsheet that you supplied us, our form was in a different format because we had to lay
Yeah,
out our
yeah,
form.
yeah, yeah.
And that was when I started. I was like looking at the form and then looking at this. So I had to reconfigure your spreadsheet into the order of our form, fill it all in, and then reconfigure back to the way you had it, just to make things easier. Um, but there were little tips, on when you're filling it in the Excel spreadsheet, when you know that, sorry, I'm looking at the form here, most people are going to be in our place, we're going to be permanent Servier. So I had ticked all those. And then if I came down the form and found somebody that wasn't a permanent Servier, I would change it rather than having to tick it each time. But look, there's no quick fix. It is manual and intensive and long.
Yes. No, that was brilliant. There's many more questions and we'll come back to them towards the later. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was brilliant. And
No problem. You're
we will
very
be,
welcome.
no, that was brilliant. I would now like to invite my colleague Louise Marie. She's a senior sustainability advisor in business in the community to come on screen along with Norma Conway, DE&I Wellbeing Manager and PDSB. Norma, Louise, very welcome. I will hand you over now and go off screen.
Thanks, Richa. And hi, Norma. Lovely to see you.
Morning. Morning, Louise.
And so, look, thanks so much for joining us, Norma. It was great to hear and really enjoyed and Andrea's presentation there. And I'm looking to you, Norma, very, very different sector.
Yes.
And would you maybe just like to talk us through your journey of voluntary disclosure, kind of the highs and the lows, or is there specific cornerstones that you think, yeah, that really helped us to successfully deliver a voluntary disclosure campaign?
Yeah, totally, Louise, and thanks for the invite to be here today. Andrea, I spent many years working in medical device manufacturing, so I feel your pain around the communications and the posters and the constant tap on shoulders to try and encourage people to engage. So I I can totally relate, but we are in a different industry in PTSB. So I suppose that I'll share a little bit about our story and a bit about PTSB. So I suppose hopefully most people on the call are familiar with PTSB within your communities. We are one of the three retail banks in Ireland. We have 98 branches nationwide, we have 6 administration offices with over 3,000 colleagues across the bank. And at the moment, 69% of our roles are hybrid. Overall, kind of thinking about our demographics, we have 53% of colleagues are female across all departments. And we're very proud to have 55% female representation on the board, which is led by a fantastic female chair and role model for us in Julie O'Neill. On any given day, we have between 65 and 74 nationalities within the bank, and that does change kind of from quarter when we look at the data. And 20% of our colleagues at the moment are from countries other than Ireland, with the Indian community being the second biggest population within the bank, which is quite important at the moment. But you might get the sense from this that we talk about the numbers a lot, and that may be the nature of our business a little bit. We have a lot of bankers within the organization within senior leader roles, so the numbers are always kind of high priority and talking points. But we talk about the numbers not just with colleagues in mind. We think about our numbers in relation to our customers and the communities that we work in. So as a bank, it's really important that we reflect modern Ireland. We reflect those customers to ensure that we have products and services to meet their needs. And that won't happen if we don't have a colleague base reflective of those customers. And I say, that's really helpful for anybody starting this journey, and trying to help their organization understand the why, and knowing your workplace reflects your customer base is a really nice connection to make for people. But DEI has been, a key area of the focus for the bank since 2017. We launched our first DEI strategy in 2018, and data has been a key pillar of that strategy since way back then. We have a section within our HR system for voluntary disclosure where we encourage colleagues to share their demographics. It's a safe space, so no one can see that data. HR can't see it, we can't see it, their manager can't see it. It's just a couple of colleagues within the HR data team that can run the anonymized reports, which are then shared with us and shared with the executive committee and the board each quarter. If I think about the highs and the lows, Louise, I suppose I'd love to be sitting here today saying, yeah, we've got it, we've cracked it.
We've nailed it.
We've got it. This is the perfect solution. But that's not the case. We've made some great progress, but we still have quite a way to go. But I suppose sharing some of our journey, some of those highs and the lows. So one of the approaches we took, we last updated our DEI strategy in 2023. And when we did that, we took a slightly different approach. We have probably very similar to lots of people on the call. We've 8 pillars within our DEI strategy, and those pillars, they stay consistent. The actions within them evolve as we evolve, but the topics remain the same. So in 2023, we decided, in addition to those pillars, we call out 3 specific areas of focus. And we decided in those areas that we felt were particularly topical at the time, based both on feedback from colleagues and what was getting a lot of attention externally as well. So we called out disability inclusion, both from a physical and neurodiversity perspective. We called out external impact to consider customers or suppliers or communities. And then the third one was we called out DEI data. And just by doing that, we made a really clear statement that the DEI data was something we wanted to focus on, that we needed to do better on. So that kind of kicked off a campaign. We shared information on WorkVivo, which is our internal social media platform. We created how-to videos so people could clearly see step by step how to input their data in our system. We got on the agenda of town halls, of exco meetings, really everywhere we could. And then we agreed internally, which was really powerful with the executive committee, a percentage that we'd like to see each department reach. And we added that to our DEI dashboard, which really helped. I suppose it's back to this numbers piece. It's really helped connect our senior leaders and really helped engage them. And I suppose they really wanted to understand then the why, to be able to speak confidently about DEI data within their own teams. We worked really closely with the ERGs to help build trust, and at every event or every communication, we would talk about the optional DEI data and why it was important. So over the last 2 years, we have made great progress. We've gone from 23% of the organisation disclosing data in 2023 to 48% now in our most recent dashboard. But I will say it feels like we've plateaued a little bit. So we're still making increases quarter on quarter, but very small increases. So, we actually met with the team this week just to start to think about any improvements we could make to the platform, the drop-down menus, how we could enhance them. And then to hopefully make some enhancements and improvements and go again with a communication campaign. I think, some of the learnings along the way, we realized, and as you're looking at the data every quarter, we realized that we were losing data, particularly as longer tenured employees were leaving. So that employees that I suppose trust had been built up throughout the years, they'd added all their information. So we could see the importance of then reaching the new starters as they were joining the organisation to balance that out. And while I would also always attend induction and talk about the DEI data, we're very conscious that there's a lot of information going into those sessions. So we introduced an email that comes directly from the DEI team with the ask, the explanation of the why, the how-to video, which has really helped. And that goes out every month to new starters. We introduced our new CRG Adapt also in the last 2 years, and that's made a big impact. So we could see, and probably similar to Andrea, we could see the completion of the disability field was considerably lower than all the other fields. And that's why disability inclusion was also called out as a key area of focus for the strategy. And that's why Adapt was set up. So it's great as we talk about this that we can make that really clear connection for people, that the data was low. We took an action, Adapt was set up, and now we can see the impact of the actions that Adapt have taken. So things like rolling out disability awareness training for the SLT and now to all colleagues, and the various different events and communications that Adapt have been running and again, where they talk openly about DEI data and the importance of it. So it's a great example for us to share with colleagues that we could see the data told us something was wrong, didn't quite know what. We took an action and we're seeing an improvement. And just finally, then I suppose it's worth mentioning. So we've just gone through the Investors in Diversity Gold reaccreditation, but some of the positive feedback that we received as part of that report was around the DEI data and how we were analysing it. So we got some recommendations for improvements as well, but we did get some really positive feedback on the use of the CSO data and the Elevate data. And because it just shows that we have a benchmark, and that really helps in how we tell our story.
Great, and it's great to know where she's and no surprise, a financial institution using the data, the figures, to really inform, your strategy and your planning and your training and development programs. And I guess like there's always challenges, and I guess more recently the complexity of the current disturbances in terms of our society, racism, hate speech and discrimination, like they're featuring in everyday conversations. And we understand that getting employees to disclose diversity data is becoming more difficult. And you mentioned there about PTSB leadership, and both through your chair and your CEO, they've come out strong on the need to double down on inclusion and zero tolerance to discrimination. There's power in those words. Like, how has that been received by your colleagues?
Like as you said, Louise, it's really, really powerful. And I suppose just to explain to everybody at the start of this year, as part of our annual report, which is an externally published report, our chair, Julie O'Neill, has an opening statement as part of the annual report, and included a significant amount of content about DEI in her statement. I suppose really clearly calling out our continued commitment to DEI. That we recognise that some companies were pivoting and changing their approach. It's not what we're doing. And that was fantastic on multiple levels. It offered us great reassurance. At the time I'd sent that message directly to our ERGs to ensure that they heard it really clearly. And as we talk at town halls or team meetings, as we get questions from colleagues, it's really great to be able to reference that statement right from the front. That it's just been fantastic to be able to quote the chair of the board. And similarly, we had an event recently in head office to celebrate the launch of our wellbeing strategy. We had invited external partners and internal supporters to come together to celebrate. And Eamon Crowley, our CEO, again, really clearly on stage in front of all our guests, messaged our commitment to DEI and our support for colleagues, particularly now it's such a turbulent and vulnerable time for many people. And it really matters, it really matters hearing these messages from the CEO, from the chair of the board, particularly as they've been communicated both internally and externally. Like it's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's really important that we keep showing up for each other, and leadership has a key role in that, Norma. And I guess in tandem with that leadership, are there specific actions that you're taking to support colleagues affected by these issues?
Yeah, and like there's probably, I suppose, a mix of ongoing actions that are long-term actions that sit within our DEI strategy, and then actions taken specifically to address the recent attacks and the external narratives on DEI that are making so many people nervous to travel, afraid to use public transport, worried for their families. So I suppose on the long-term side first, this year we created the Unity Network, and we have 5 amazing volunteer-led employee resource groups that constantly drive us to do better and challenge us. But I suppose as part of those conversations with the ERGs, we recognise that together as a collective we're stronger, and there's power in that collective coming together. So we wanted to recognise intersectionality in our ERG networks. And we created the Unity Network to represent that collaboration, support, innovation across the network, so that everything we're doing it together and supporting each other and collaborating. We've been working with, and many people are probably familiar with Dr. Mamobo Ogoro, who's fantastic, and Gorm Media. So we've been working with Gorm as early adapters of the Unified Business Programme. And we started this conversation with Mamobo and Gorm last year. around intercultural competence and cultural intelligence. And it's something that really actually caught the attention of colleagues. So we're just getting ready to launch a series of trainings to help colleagues understand how we can unify across the cultural barriers that exist and to help teams work more effectively together. So that's really exciting. And this was launched just a couple of weeks ago at our annual Intercultural Festival, hosted by our Dice ERG, where Mamobo spoke and was joined by the chair of the Indian Council of Ireland, who spoke about the recent attacks. And again, that's really powerful for all of our colleagues to hear and to show our visible support too. I suppose more recently, in recent months, we've taken a number of actions. Initially we sent communications from the Unity Network pointing to the supports available and encouraging colleagues that felt vulnerable to speak to someone, whether that was their manager, SLT, ourselves, or EAP. We had a message go out directly from one of our EXCO members, who's sponsor of our DICE Employee Resource Group, to the senior leadership team to ensure, I suppose, to back up that initial communication and ensure those conversations were happening and that the messages of support and flexibility were reaching people. And then there was follow-up conversations with senior leaders to, I suppose, really make sure everybody understand the nature of what's happening and how we needed to support people. And we've been out supporting, attending town halls, and consistently sharing that message that we want people to speak up, to talk to someone, and flag if they need support or are feeling vulnerable. And then, externally, we've been staying very close to the Irish Centre for Diversity and IBEC. I suppose really to make sure as a business we're aligned with other businesses and doing everything that we can for colleagues. I think, we try and show up in everything that we do as authentically as possible. So I think the recent events launching our wellbeing strategy, mental health supports, our Elephant in the Room, the DICE event with Mamobo, the chair of the Indian Council of Ireland, and just this week actually ADAPT, another one of our ERGs, had a fantastic events focused on disability inclusion. And these are, for me, are the real indicators of our culture. And seeing the very visible support from our executive committee, from our board, from our senior leaders at these events, and similar to the message from the chair and the board, it's more important than ever for colleagues to see that visible support.
Yeah, those were, and thanks so much for sharing that number, because that's real tangible things that all our organisations can embrace. And you talked there about the need to unify and collaborate. And I guess we are stronger together. And I guess on the call this morning, there's a lot of people from the Elevate community, Elevate Pledge community. Is there anything that you'd suggest maybe that we could, through the power of the collective, we could do more together?
I think there's clearly ongoing issues and there's so many of our underrepresented communities at the moment have been under attack. So there is that need to constantly look at the supports and initiatives that we're running, both in the long-term planning, but also, being agile and ready to act to offer supports for people. I think, we're incredibly lucky for those of us that work in DEI and wellbeing that we have communities like this, where everybody's open and willing to share. Nobody's kind of protecting their IP. It's like, okay, this is what's worked for us. Go run with it, if this can help you. And I think the more that we can do together and learn together, the more powerful we can be. So I think it's keeping up events like this, keeping the conversation opening and sharing amongst these communities is really important going forward, Louise.
Great, thanks, Norma. We might just pause it there, Norma, and says opportunity now to if Richa and Andrea would come back on screen. I can see some questions are popping in at the bottom of the screen. I can see the ticker tape going up. Richard, do you want to kick off there with some of the questions that have been...
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do that, thanks, Norma, for sharing that. I think I was just constantly writing down things, because even though we always have these conversations, I think it is brilliant to hear it in this format when you hear that, okay, this worked on this and nothing is happening in isolation, that your ERGs are now a part of a unity network. And you talked about the unified approach with Mamobo, and as an organization, you're moving forward, taking that approach, and how that is impacting the voluntary disclosure was amazing, because getting people to click that button or disclose is not easy. So there's loads of questions, and I'm pretty sure we will try and get through as much as we can. But for anybody on the call, if we cannot, please, Louise, I think there's some backend noise from your end.
Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, sorry about that. There's a question, of course, which is more technical in terms of what challenges, if any of you have encountered from GDPR perspective, and how easy or not it was to overcome them.
I suppose, well, I can take that first. And we collected the information last year. It was in paper form and it was under lock and key. I mean, it was all anonymous, and then it was input by me and sent to you. And when I was 100% sure that you had the information, and this was all communicated as well on the day actually when people were filling in the form. The forms were that it would be input. We had made the decision in the end; it would just be input by one person. That was me. The paper was then shredded. The file was sent to you. Once you had the file was deleted at this end. So I'm not an expert on GDPR, but as from talking with HR, I think at that time we were okay. And then the information was gone to you and you were releasing the report.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks. There was a process. Norma, you hold it on the HR systems.
Yeah, so we would have worked really closely with the data protection team to make sure so we have quite a lengthy document behind it detailing the how secure the data is. We have limited access, and it's actually one of the things that we're constantly having to message is that people can't see your DEI data within the system. So as a manager, you can't see the diversity data for your team, and it is only that one or two people within the data team that can access even running the reports. So everything's anonymized. We just have to have very clear messaging within the system. So anything you click on, there's a pop-up to say, you're sharing your data. It's voluntary, but it is anonymized. It's not been shared elsewhere. So there's, I suppose, very tight controls around it from a GDPR perspective.
Yeah, and I think it is going back to the thing that the two of you touched on building that trust amongst people to say that this is where it's going, this is what it's going for, being very open and clear about it, because of course you need to be very mindful of how you're minding the data and who has access to it. But even if you've put all the processes in place and everything's in order, people need to believe that that's exactly what's going to happen. So that's perfect. Norma, I might come to you on this one. We spoke about the unified approach, and there's a question in there to say, did you get any feedback from your staff that they don't want to be singled out, especially from different ethnic backgrounds, and they just want to be included like everyone else?
It's very specific, but no, I don't I don't believe we've had feedback with that kind of.
If I may just, and because I was thinking it from the perspective you had said, you constantly spoke about the variety of nationalities that you have and the ethnicities that you have in the organization. But the fact that all your ERGs are volunteers, all your ERGs are part of that unity group, and everything that you're doing is impacting everybody in the organization. So they're not necessarily is going to be somebody who would say that.
And I think, Risha, even sorry to interrupt, but the Unified Business Program, I think one of the real benefits of it is it's around everybody's cultural makeup. So wherever you grow up, whatever your life experiences are, they all feed into how you now behave and how you communicate. And that's relevant no matter who we are, where we've come from. So the really important messaging around the Unified Business Program is that we all need to learn how to communicate and interact based on those behaviors that we've learned over the years because of the various experiences we've had. It's not about sexual orientation. It's not about ethnicity. It's not about all the various demographics. It's about everything that makes us who we are, because that all shapes how we act in the office, how we communicate. So we need to understand everybody's background and understand how everybody wants to communicate and how we can all work together to really make that work. And that's a really important part of the message around the Unified Business Program.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense. We're constantly talking about this universal piece, and it sometimes becomes very hard. Like one of the conversations between you and Louise when I was listening about the acts of racism and discrimination, there is always some community that is highlighted or impacted, but there are intersectional aspects of each member of the community as well. So we need to be very mindful of that. I am going to very quickly take a couple of more questions and then we will conclude. It is talking about how there's a question on how you're managing the new joiners to buy into data gathering at different levels in the organization.
I know, Ferry, when we have new starters, I go in and meet all of our new starters at induction, and I certainly introduce the fact that every year now we have this survey and so on, and we explain about the survey a little bit more. So our new joiners are aware of it from the get-go. So it shouldn't be a new topic, it shouldn't come as a surprise for them when the communications come out.
Yeah, quite similar for us. So we'd feature in the induction presentations and go through it. As I said, I'm conscious that induction people, there's a lot of information there. So we did start to follow up with that email, and I think it goes out once a month to all new starters to say, hey, it's us on the DEI team. Here's this is the DEI data, this is what it is, why we'd like it, what we do with it, and here's the video on how to use it. But it's to try and engage as much as we can as soon as someone starts. We've talked about trying to gather more data as part of the onboarding process, and whether that's the right thing to do or not. We haven't gone down that route at the moment, and I think there's a trust piece in it. So when someone's new to the organization, you haven't built that trust yet. So it's nice to actually have someone join and get a sense of who we are before doing that. But yeah, I suppose there's lots of conversations around gathering that data from new starters.
That's brilliant. No, thank you. And there's loads more questions, and sorry to everybody, but we'll get to them eventually. Just very quickly before we conclude the Q&A, can I ask Norma, while I have you there, quick tips or tricks or takeaway for anybody who's on the call today? Quick 10 seconds.
It's making a connection. So it's helping people understand the impact of having the data and what actions you can take. So it's kind of creating that full loop for people, I think.
Brilliant. And Andrea, quick tip.
Communications, just absolutely communicate, and don't leave it till the last minute. Prepare and communicate.
Brilliant.
And I see a message. I think there's a message in there from Linda. I think it is. I was looking at the messages a minute ago, and I'm happy to share, and I'm happy to meet with Linda, if she'd like to. I know she has 2,300. It's Bus Éireann, but yeah, happy to have a meet with her if she'd like that.
Brilliant. We'll work with that. Thank you so much, Andrea, Norma, Louise, for your time today. And there was loads in there. And like I said, I have a lot of notes myself. I will just quickly, for everybody else on the session today, I am going to quickly share my screen and give you a snapshot of what the Elevate 2026 data collection campaign timelines look like. Like I said, in due course, we will come back to the questions. There's loads of questions in there. Can't believe we are already here, but what's coming next for all of you is we will be releasing the 2026 data pack by end of November. It'll give you time to pass it on to all the relevant people who are involved in that process, set up resourcing. As always, the data collection opens for 6 weeks. It'll start from 5th of January and will end mid-February, that is on the 14th of February on Friday. We are planning the annual report launch like every other year, except this year because it was our 25th anniversary. Like every other year, we are planning the report launch to happen in end of April, mid-May 2026. This is going to be our 5th annual report. So my ask to all of you is to give a big push on the data, give a big push on talking to us, tell us, have a conversation on to what's going on. As always, we will have weekly data clinics during the data collection period, and we highly, highly encourage all signatories to have one-to-one conversations. You can book them in the period of January and February. Every information related to all of this will go out in the data pack. You will have the guidance document. If you're doing it for the first time, I would highly encourage reading the document. It's a long document, but please read it from front to end. It has loads of things that you can that'll make it easy for you to do it. That's everything from us today. Thank you so much, and I hope you all got something out of that conversation.
Business in the Community, Ireland.